There's a metaphor that comes to my mind often, and it's the metaphor of driving a car, right? So when you're driving, you have a large glass windshield in front of you, and you have a small, relative to the size of the windshield, you have a small rear view mirror. You cannot move forward looking in the rearview mirror. Now, you want to glance in the rearview mirror and you want to glance around the side. The challenge becomes, how far forward do you look?
Hey guys, this is Sid Patel, your host to the Wisdom Show. This is a new show where I'm going to meet leaders of US and other global countries. My idea is to really bring thought leadership to you all, especially the drinks industry and the cannabis industry in which we operate, on how decisions are made, on how to stretch your goals, how to really drive ambitions throughout your team, how to use leadership principles from the people who have done it. So the core thing here is I'm going to only interview people who have built businesses from scratch, who have seen this journey, and we're going to share their wisdom and how you can apply that. Wendy, you are our first guest for this show.
I am so delighted, Sid. Thank you. Delighted to be with you.
Great. So why don't you give our community a little bit of context about your journey and some of your achievements, please?
I think it's been an incredible journey, and the word journey is really the right word to use, because I do think it took me a long time in my life to come to really believe that it wasn't just about the destination, that so much of how we limit our own thinking is because we're thinking about getting there and not thinking about the journey. So early in my career, I thought I would have two jobs, right? Many of us were raised with a very sort of conservative, wasn't meant to limit us, but a more conservative viewpoint, which is that you have a job and you stay there for a very long time. And so I thought I would have two jobs. I thought I would have my first job and then my second job. And my first job out of college was at a commercial bank in Chicago, and I was part of an analyst training program. And what I really learned from that was as much about who I didn't want to be as a leader as I did about, and probably more about who I didn't want to be, and then sort of from there thought about how I wanted to lead. And my next job, which I thought would be my last job, was working in a family business, and I was going to be the third generation
in
my own family's business. And after a couple years, what I realized was I loved the business and I hated working with my family. And so I left. And I never thought there would be a moment where I would have to think about what was next, right? I had planned to evolve my family's business. I thought it was this incredible opportunity to build on this legacy that I felt so connected to my grandfather, who I had never met, and my grandmother, who took over the business when my grandfather suddenly died when his sons were 19, 16, and 15. And at the same moment in time where I was starting to think about this, one of my closest, oldest friends called me, and she was just telling me what her younger brother was doing. And not in the context of me looking for a job. And she said, you really ought to reach out to him and talk to him. And long story short, I went to see him, and he was starting in a website development company. And this was 1994 or 1995. I didn't understand anything he was saying. But by the end of sitting and talking with him, I was in. And I knew in my heart I was always an entrepreneur.
Got it.
This was my first time, and we were either the first or second website development company in the country. There was no playbook.
Yeah, at that time, yeah. I think that's where my next question was leading as well, which I wanted to ask was, I did not know that you had a family DNA as well of business, right?
Yeah.
Do you think there is always an added, there is something where you have generations of business in the blood? How that helps you, because you've seen at breakfast meetings or whatever it is, there is some sort of adversity at when you're getting, what kind of examples do you remember where you thought that I think it's I see myself more of a business person, and slowly you self-realized, as you said, that I think I'm an entrepreneur?
From the youngest age, like someone recently asked me this, and they said, when did you know you wanted to be a business person? I said, I remember, I don't know whether it was like third or fourth grade, I built a diorama of a bank and myself as running a bank.
Nice.
This is not normal
Got it.
for a second or a third grader or whatever. So I think it was in me, but I think a big part of that came from the conversations with our families. It was always about business, right?
Yeah.
When you grow up in a family business that's 3 different
True.
families within your family and multi-generation, all talk is always about it. And I had these 2 amazing, incredible uncles who would pile all the kids in the car on the weekends, right? They needed something to do with the kids. They also were never not working. And they drove around the neighborhoods of Chicago. So we grew up driving neighborhoods, and you inevitably hear the conversation, a lot of the conversation. And the reason they drove neighborhoods all the time was they believed in that you could see and feel the change coming. You could figure out where the path of progress was going by driving and walking these streets over and over again. And we climbed on, dirt piles on construction sites. So I think really having the benefit of having heard the language from such a young age appealed to me. And I think it's just in my DNA. I'm an entrepreneur.
Got it. Great. So let's fast forward, and you are running your company, and that's where we will go a little deeper on, day-to-day running your operations and so on. I think one of the things that, I always find that after year 5 of business and so on, complacencies come and you become process oriented, and right, all that is happening. But at the same time, you should not let your ambitions go down. Otherwise, overall, if the leader starts settling down, I think
sets the
speed
tone for everybody.
Yeah, the speed goes down. So how have you sort of convinced yourself again and again to keep up with that speed? Is there any things that you do?
Yeah, so I'm really fortunate to be in a business where some of what we do is repeatable, but every project is different. So we do primarily ground up construction, renovation, and sale leasebacks of food manufacturing and food distribution buildings. So I always joke that I hold up a sign on the side of the highway that says, "We'll do real estate for food."
Got it.
So there's a lot of commonalities, but you're always building something from scratch, right? So there's this concept of both mentally and then the visual metaphor of building. And every project, while I can say I am an expert in refrigeration and underfloor freezer systems, I never thought I would have an expertise in wastewater and mechanical systems. Every project is different in that when we're doing a build to suit or a renovate to suit, you really must learn about the tenant's business, about your client's business. So I've had the fortune of building a pizza manufacturing facility, a McDonald's hamburger patty manufacturing facility, a bagel manufacturing facility, croissant manufacturing. And you have to learn your tenant's business to build these buildings well and to design them well. And so you get to, it's not the have to, it's the get to.
Yeah.
So every time we start a project, I get to learn about a new business, a new industry.
And that is sort of a driving factor
It's a driving
to keep on doing new things and more things?
Because every project is different, right? And to learn about, I literally get to see how the sausage is made.
At what point, money was not the factor to keep chasing?
Oh, it's always,
Okay.
it still is,
All
but
right.
it isn't the primary.
Got it.
I think I've thought a lot about who I want to show up as a leader today. And to think about that, you have to think about your why, right? So I push myself to think about, why do I continue to work so hard? Why do I continue to dream and to think big?
And that's a self-talk, right?
That's self-talk. I'm big on mantras and self-talk.
Yeah.
And
what answers come when you say, okay, Wendy, why, or how would you work harder, right? Also sometimes that you want to motivate yourself to work harder.
I love learning.
Okay.
Right? So this thought of being a continuous and lifelong learner, it's interesting. I'm also a people person and a people pleaser, right? So this notion of, I always say that when we're working with a tenant that we're building a building for, we are sitting on the tenant side of the table, wearing their hat making decisions together for the benefit of their business for the long term. So we're not sitting opposite where I'm trying to make short-term decisions to make money and they're trying to make long-term decisions to reduce their operating costs. We're sitting on the same side of the table wearing their hat.
Got it.
And it's really incredible as an entrepreneur, particularly, and running a small business, to get to be a part of bigger teams. And so I get to sort of jump onto the vision of other people, other CEOs' visions,
Understood.
learn their businesses without being constrained of having to do the same thing over again. So I know that when I finish that project in 2 or 3 or 4 years, I'm on to the next one, or I may be working on multiple projects. So this concept of continuous learning and pushing boundaries. I am an athlete, right? And this is something I came to as an adult, but it's one of my favorite mantras that I read a long time ago in triathlon that's really translated beautifully to the rest of my life is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So it is not, for me, it is never about complacency. I'm just not the kind of person. I need structure in my life.
Yes.
But I don't fear change.
And you've accepted that, right? Like it's a game. It's daily punches, fires. That's what I think you just started the conversation with, like today.
I see myself, we've all had hard life experiences. There isn't anyone we meet, right? We can look at people and say, oh, they've had an easy life, and we don't know that, right? And so we've all had challenges. I think that for me, I learned how truly resilient I am.
Got it.
And
you've used
helped.
it to your advantage practically to keep pushing, and you know that you will get through this if you just keep on going, right?
Yeah, and I think for me, I think a lot about, there's a metaphor that comes to my mind often, and it's the metaphor of driving a car, right? So when you're driving, you have a large glass windshield in front of you, and you have a small, relative to the size of the windshield, you have a small rear view mirror. You cannot move forward looking in the rearview mirror. Now, you want to glance in the rearview mirror and you want to glance around the side. The challenge becomes, how far forward do you look, right? So this concept of not looking backwards, and I take that concept of not looking backwards further to say, when I do glance backwards and I think about the hard times, it was because I was defining myself by my past. And so I encourage people.
That's a good one.
We hold ourselves back.
True.
Right?
I think we definitely, those are the things you judge yourself on, and you never usually give benefit of the wins you've had. I think that's a good point. Let's go on goal setting and ambitions, because I think they're relevant somehow, right? You set up a goal, let's say you're an example, some company's doing $10 million and they set up a goal, we're going to hit 14 million next year. 3 months down the line, we know it's a stretched goal now already because we've missed that first quarter badly. So at that time, how do you operate? Like, you double down the effort, but no matter what, we're going to make it happen, or you just make it a little now, okay, 2 years, 18 million. What's your way of that pursuit to that sort of goal that you've already set?
I think one of the things that defines a really good leader is decision making. Right? So leaders must, particularly in times of crisis or great change, right? So we've seen this the past couple of years, and we see this in newer industries like the cannabis industry. As a leader, you have to make decisions every day with limited and imperfect information. So that means you have to believe in yourself, and you have to be courageous. And for me, I add curiosity to that, right? To be a good leader, I think you need to be curious, also need to be a good listener. So my view is pivot, right? If what you've been doing isn't working, you have to gather your team or your own thoughts, right? It depends on the size of your team, and say, okay, let's be honest. What's working? What's not working? And let's not be afraid of change, right? If it's time to pivot, and again, imperfect information, but the courage to make decisions and to say, I'm not afraid of, I don't love the word failure, but I'm not afraid of, if we set a goal and we don't achieve it, to honestly say, okay, pivot.
Yeah. What's your theory about speed versus quality? Let's say I'm sure you have 10 projects going on, right? Now, you rather have 80% but complete and move on and keep on going, or you want to focus on, when you tell your managers out there that it's okay, I can live with 90% accuracy, let's get finished by 18th October.
I have chosen to be in really dynamic, fast-moving markets. It's perfection is the enemy.
Because
you got to get things done.
But let's forget about the client's delivery, right? I'm talking about your team day-to-day operations or the goal setting. How you value deadline and speed more, or it's okay if someone tells you, look, it's going to take time, Wendy, if you want quality stuff.
So I'm an endurance athlete.
Okay.
So it is not about speed as an endurance athlete. Okay. It is about pacing, right? You need to finish strong at a finish line.
All right.
And if it takes longer to finish,
so you need to finish strong at the finish line. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Meaning
you finish at the finish line. You cannot.
But you need to be strong at that time.
Yeah. You want to finish feeling strong and with strength. So the finish line is the beginning of the next, right? There,
nice.
In business, it isn't as though you cross the finish line, raise your hands and say, True. I'm done. Next.
Back on that ambition thing, I'm sure I'll relate to my story, and then I'm sure you have most of the entrepreneurs when they start at 25-ish age, their ambitions are like huge, which is good. It's delusional, reality is this and that, which is a good thing because
it's actually a great thing.
You're fearless, right? You think $100 million company I'm going to build,
great.
National brand, and so on.
No limits.
And then wow, 1 million took 2 years. And then wow, 1.2, oh, that's it. And and then your ambitions just become, and then maybe you come to that stage where, okay, you're doing good in life. It's $5 million business. It's still a great business. If you earn in America, as 400,000, you're in the top 1%. So, it's good. Life is good. And then
should be happy.
The ambitions are gone because life has become comfortable. But there is a difference between, I've studied people and I like that these days. So there is something weird about those people who just keeps on going, because it's something missing where I want to come to and know from you. That 100 million is something inside. It's nothing else, There's something which just tells them to just keep on going.
Well, maybe there's an element of it that we're never happy enough, right? But I think it's a part curiosity, part a fire within us. I don't see things like being done or retiring. These are not
Correct.
Words that resonate with me. It's what's the next challenge.
So how do you raise the next? How do you define next? When I define next for our company, it has to be realistic next, right? Yeah. So if our capabilities just allow us to do 20% growth, then that's sort of 30% is the target I come up with. And the market just tells you that you can't grow now anymore. It's a bad time for wine spirits, or let's say cannabis, so on, right?
Yeah.
So how do you define your next goal? How do you do goal setting?
Interesting. I'm not a goal setter. I never have been. It really, again, back to the mantras. Early on, it became, when I was struggling with triathlon, I sought out a lot of advice from people I respected, and what came out of that was this concept of finish at the finish line and finish feeling strong and proud. And so I think a lot about what kind of projects I want to work on, how I want to spend my time, and not as much about what level we want to be at. But I need to be continuously energized.
But I think it's
interested.
Also the stage you are in, Wendy.
Oh, there's no question.
So you are at that stage where you're finding deeper purpose and
no
quality.
Question. Yeah.
So I'm saying about a person who's 35, 40, who's wants to still has to prove still.
Yeah.
How would you advise that person to do some self-talks to keep on raising their ambitions?
I think thinking about what's important to you in life, right? Really believing, right? What is important? Is it important to live a meaningful life, a purposeful life? Is it a joyful life? Is it just about making money? It's rarely just about making money. And really think about who you want to be and what you need to get there. And if that, for some of us, it's setting numbers. I want to do 5 deals in the next 5 years. How do I set myself up for success for that? So it is really about defining both the bigger goals, right? And I think about thinking big. And I know it sounds a little weird to think about thinking about something, but this unbounded thinking, right? So if I was talking to a young person today or to myself years ago, I would have thought, what I say to people now is think big, right? Unbounded thinking. If there were no limits, what would you want to do? If you had no fears, what would you do if you had no fears? We limit ourselves so much in our thinking.
That's true. That's a good way to
unbound it, right? So unbind yourself from the things that you say, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not talented. You know, whatever it is that the I'm not enough, to say, I want to build a business. I want to build a $10 million business. Okay. First step, believe that you can achieve it.
That's so true. Yeah.
You know, sure, it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard. It's going to be harder than you thought. And one of my friends who's a fairly new entrepreneur was really struggling. She had a great business idea. She started the business. She was not an entrepreneur. She had never seen herself as an entrepreneur. She called me about a year into it, and she was having one of those days that we all have. That's just hard. We're in the dumps. We don't feel good about ourselves. And she said, when does this get easier? I said, well, I've been at this for 18 years. I'll let you know.
Yeah, I recently had a moment personally as well, to be honest, and exactly, this kind of things were going. So I go on the self-doubt thing, right? Then it comes down to one question. I realized that I asked myself, do you really think you can do this? Are you truly an entrepreneur? You know, can you actually do, let's say, $20 million business? And if the answer was no, then it's realistically no.
Yeah.
And if it actually is yes, then it just tells me go back to work, stop overthinking.
Yeah, I think there's this interesting blend of confidence and experience, right? So it's sort of like a seesaw, where the experience tells us how to do it, but the confidence helps you with what to do. Right? And some days we're better on the experience, and some days we're better on the confidence. And this is again where resilience comes into play, right? You could have looked at yourself and said, I'm exhausted. I'm continuously exhausted. The harder days are outnumbering the good days right now. And then you come back to, okay, I believe in myself. I can do this. And if I need to pivot, I need to be realistic. Right? The honest conversations. Yeah. So, going back to what we started with earlier, self-talk is big for me.
What kind of self-talks do you do? Just, including diary or journal or whatever it is, your process of motivating yourself or reviewing yourself.
So I jokingly say, and this is kind of from being in the construction business, that I have a tool belt. And I have these tools in my tool belt. And that the same tool does not work to fix a problem every day, right? You can't bring a screwdriver every day expecting to construct things, right? Some days you need a hammer, some days you need a screwdriver, all these different tools. So it's having different tools to draw from, right? So some days when things are tough, I draw on one tool, and another day, so it isn't having, I think for a lot of people where the frustration comes in is they have kind of one go-to, and if that go-to doesn't fix the problem, right? If your go-to is, I'm going to go out for a run, and you have a really bad run, it makes things, it compounds the problem. But I started years ago after two very personal tragedies in my life. I found myself driving around a lot. I know for some reason the car became the safe place for me to cry. I would literally just drive around and sob. And one day, I don't even know how, but I found myself in front of a beading store, like, little beads. And I had passed by, I must have been driving kind of the same route in these days that I was driving around. And I walked into the bead store, and the woman who owned the store happened to be there. And I sat down and started beading. And that became a new tool in my dual belt.
Mm-hmm.
And the neat thing about beading,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit like some of my sports, was
Mm-hmm.
that and I chose to do these like microscopic tiny little beads.
Mm.
And I'm not generally a great detail person.
Mm.
But when you're beading, your mind and body have to be in the same place at the same time. You're literally one bead at a time looking at things.
Mm.
And that became another tool for me.
That became a meditative sort of
yeah,
thing.
mind and body in the same place at the same time.
Mm.
To take yourself out of whatever this sometimes soul-crushing moments can be. If you get your mind and body, same thing as so my tools are my yoga practice, any bike, swim, run.
What time you get up? Let's just walk through your daily thing. And because what I want to know is how much self-time one has to spend, how much thinking time, how do you prioritize your day?
So I'm up at 5:15 almost every morning. Nice. Without an alarm clock most of the time. I bounce out of bed. One of my nicknames is Tigger. Mm-hmm. So like I wake up in the morning and I,
happy.
Unlike most people, I do not have caffeine.
So you have energy in the morning.
Unbelievable energy in the morning. I'm really lucky, right? And you have to know yourself, right? If you're not a morning person, trying to become a morning person is possible. It takes a long time. But so I start off with some form of movement. Mm-hmm. And that's my me time. I don't like group activities because that is my time to either think about things or more often not.
So while you're exercising, you're thinking?
Sometimes.
Okay.
And I do, so if let's say the middle of the day, I've come to a point where I recognize I am not being productive or I'm stuck, I get out on my bike. I believe I have come up with my most creative or best problem solving ideas on my bicycle for some reason on the bike. But when I'm practicing yoga, it is the four corners of the mat, nothing else. So again, these like different tools. Yeah. But so I have to move in the morning. I'm a much nicer person if I have done some form of exercise. Got it. And then I start I like to say I want to read the newspaper in the morning. I've dispensed with that idea. The newspaper comes
up. When is the first time you see your cell phone or any gadget?
The minute I get up.
Oh, okay.
It's a bad habit.
Got it.
Yeah, and my phone is next to me at all times.
So you said you were thinking, but then you're attacking the fires, or you're not doing anything, or just the news kind of thing?
I'm assessing. I would call it, when I look at my phone, I am assessing the day. I will try not to respond if something needs an immediate response. But what I don't want to do at 5:15 or 5:30 in the morning is derail my day. And it's hard not to derail you.
You're anxious what's going on. And that's why you just are just seeing like that, right?
Because I want to know. I love having a very high standard of customer service, right? I mean, I'm a people pleaser. So serving my customers is important to me. And there's this kind of, it's not necessarily a healthy thing that many entrepreneurs have, which is responding immediately, right? It's like a Pavlovian response that's not necessarily healthy, but I can tell you that I'm not really good at everything that I say that I want to be good at. So, I say I'm going to not let anything distract me in the morning.
On the not good at things, did you learn? Did you read books, or do you try to fix on things that you think you were weak at?
Yes.
Or just capitalized on the strengths more?
I believe in continuous self-improvement, but there's also a realism. Like there's some things I'm never really going to be good at, and I accept that in myself. Doesn't mean I'm not trying to improve some of them, but I'm not going for perfection.
Got it.
Perfection for me is not an appealing standard for myself or in other people. Good enough. And that's also where kind of age and wisdom comes in.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to say these things 25 years ago. I would have said, how do you admit that you're vulnerable at all.
Yeah, the question I wanted to ask was really defining a good leader and what kind of practices you use more, like, how you do empathy, how you do communications.
So when I think about the person I am today, it's very hard to say, and nobody really wants to say, that out of tragedy, good things happen. And I think Sheryl Sandberg coined a very sterile term that for me really resonated, and that is post-traumatic growth. So I suffered two very deeply personal tragedies in the span of 3 years. My beloved brother was killed in a plane crash, and about 3 years later, my husband committed suicide. And so I was broken.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other way to say it. I was broken. My world was shattered. For a long time after my brother was killed, I didn't want to live. It is that simple. And my brother, my sister, and I really thought of ourselves as triplets. We had the rarest of rare sibling relationships. We were each other's best friends. We were always together. We all looked very, very similar, and so often people thought we were triplets. And my sister and I think as we began to rebuild, right? So first I had to learn to breathe again, and then to crawl, and then to walk. And I don't know, neither of us remembers who said what, but we remember where we were. We were walking on a hill. So there was even the metaphor of a hill. And I think my sister said it, and she said, "We are going to have to find a way to live joyful lives and meaningful lives and purposeful lives." And we looked at each other and said, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. And that became a focus for me, was finding meaning, finding joy, and finding purpose. And what I realized was that I really was resilient, right? I mean, it took a long time to come back to life and to be able to let go of hurt, sadness, anger, and to say, okay, I have been given this extraordinary gift. What am I going to do with it, right? And that really, if I think about the leader I am today and the person I am today, it is what came from the ashes of my shattered life.
I think it has, I'm sure, given you great way to even approach life and
perspective.
And even, optimist perspective, positive thinking,
and assessing. I think my days used to be like this of roller coasters. Now the roller coaster is maybe like that, because it really takes a lot to rile me.
And now, like any fire or any company, what are you complaining about? This is like,
and I don't want to minimize things that cause people to get excited or be troubled, right? Because that's what motivates some people. But it also lets me know that if I sit back and I breathe, I can see a path forward. I think I have a really well-developed ability to see and find a path forward. And so that's been really helpful in defining who I want to be as a leader.
So what's your definition of a good leader?
So I think a lot about empathy, right? As you said, empathy translates to listening, right? So the more you listen as a leader, I'm a data junkie. How do we gather data as leaders? We can read reports, but I think the best way to gather data is to listen. And when you're done listening, ask more questions. And so I want to be a very curious leader, and I want to be an empathetic leader, right? So, and particularly, one of the things that really attracted me to the cannabis business was this notion that I had that empathy would matter, right? So you take a business where, I don't care whether people define themselves as a medical user or a recreational user, many of us who use cannabis are doing it because we're suffering. Mentally, physically, combination thereof. And I think that women are often more comfortable leading with empathy. And so I thought, here's a business where empathy really matters and where I can lead with empathy and that the consumers and customers and patients will see that immediately.
True.
And here's a new industry. There's no playbook.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to be curious and you have to figure things out. And so when I think about what defines a good leader, curiosity, empathy, and courage. Right? You have to make decisions and you have to be courageous to make many of these decisions. It's not always rewarding, and you have to accept the fact that you're going to get things wrong and that many people won't like you for the decisions, right? That if you're a person who just wants to be liked, for me is not a great characteristic of a leader.
True.
You can't be afraid of, that often people don't like me because of the decisions I make. That's okay.
Yeah.
I'm value driven, so really
you stick with your values, and it's best way to sort of have a long term, right? If you don't align with your own principles and values, is that what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
And then if people don't fit in that, it's okay to be not likable by, let's say,
by everyone.
10%.
But if I can always look back inside myself and articulate to myself, but to my team, here's why we're doing something. Here's the value behind what we're doing, right? I think often people don't really understand why they're being asked by a leader to do something.
That's so true. Yeah.
Right? I don't understand why this person is asking. It doesn't make any sense. Well, I think as a leader, if I am sharing with them, here's why I'm making the decisions I am making. Okay. And
you do that.
Yeah. I think
sometimes we think that it's an extra time, so you don't explain so much the why.
I want people to buy into my why.
But that's just your first reports, or you also explain that's the whole philosophy you have to everyone?
Everyone.
Okay.
I mean, I like to lead culture-driven organizations, right? I'm at the top. You're buying into me,
Correct.
right? Whether it's a shareholder, a tenant, or an employee. You're buying into me.
Yeah.
Right? And if I'm not explaining myself, the simplest analogy I use is, okay, and we've all experienced this particularly lately. You're on an airplane, you've boarded, you're seated, got your seatbelt on, taken out your laptop, and nothing. You're sitting. And the plane's not taking off, you're not pushing back from the gate, nothing. If the pilot comes on and says, folks, we have no idea what's going on, but I'm going to tell you every 10 minutes what I have learned.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm fine. The simplest of communications are what give people confidence, right? So this uncomfortable feeling of why am I being asked to do what I'm doing? And I want people to repeat it back. Do you understand? Do you agree? Okay, you don't have to agree. And if you don't agree, tell me why you don't agree. I'm still going to make the decision. I may pivot based on what you've told me, but at least then we've had the dialogue of, and I think often leaders don't listen to, so again, cannabis business. If we are not in the retail stores listening to what the patient care specialists are telling us about what they're hearing from patients, and I'm sitting up in a boardroom making decisions without having listened, how can they be the best decisions, right? So if I've established that dialogue with people to say, here's the why, here's what I'm thinking, here's the why, people tend to get on board, right? I want people on for the ride. The 3 lessons, Wendy, which you would really pass on through the wisdom, which I think only an experienced leader would come up with. Big thinking, so unbounded thinking. Let yourself dream. That for me is the most important place to start. And I think number 2 is not limiting yourself, not defining yourself by your past, right? It's important to reflect upon it, but it shouldn't define us. And number 3 is trying to let go of your fears, those fears that do not serve you, right? This doesn't mean we let go of things like personal safety, not going out and doing not crazy things, but trying to face your fears and shed those fears that do not serve you. And those to me are maybe the 3 most important things that I believe in and that I hope help people as they become leaders and try to become the best leaders that we can be.